All righty. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the FreeMind podcast. We are joined by Stephen Houck, CEO and principal partner at SLRRRP. And we want to kind of jump right in and get to know Stephen. We have a really unique product with him. Actually, a really great product in various channels. He's a nationwide to an extent of 44 states now. And his base product has two versions, one being a malt version and one spirits version. So very accessible to retailers of every channel across the country. So, hey, Stephen, welcome.
Thanks. I appreciate it. It's nice to be on with you guys, especially background working with Tristan in the past.
Absolutely.
The dynamic duo is back again.
Perfect. Well, hey, Stephen, we'll just jump in with the easiest questions. Kind of where did you get started in the alcohol industry, and what brought you today to this beautiful Zoom session?
Oh man, that's such a loaded question. How much time we got? I was fortunate enough, and I thought it was normal. My mom worked at Coors Brewery for over 30 years before she retired to help watch my kiddos. But I was around beer my entire life. Like I would go, my mom was part of the Coors softball league, and I'd go, she'd work on engineering projects out at Coors. And so I'd spend weekends playing hide and seek, in the engineering department while she's working on projects and doing different things. And so for me, being part of the industry was just kind of, that's how I was brought up. So it's, I think, very different. And I don't, I've never really known anything else. From there, I loaded trucks. In college, I worked at Coors Brewery doing tours, got a job as a merchandiser at Coors Distributing, did sales there. I was fortunate enough to have Coors at least partially paid for me to go back and get my MBA. Wow. I was recruited by Oscar Blues Brewery, and I ran the Rocky Mountain region for them, and then also dabbled in some international stuff. And then I was recruited by Stone Brewery to run their international program for about 3 years, and then had an interesting opportunity to become a principal in this business and really start it and kick it off and use some of that schooling that I got to put something together.
And jump right into introduce your current company and what it is your product is.
Yeah, so we actually are one of the very first gelatin shots, alcohol-infused gelatin shots to be out in the market. So we started this company. Ed Farley, who's the original founder in this, reached out to me, said, hey, I've got an idea for something. And I had just been laid off actually from Stone. They laid off about 10% of their workforce. I was kind of looking for a job and found, the idea of doing gelatin shots really, really interesting because nobody had ever really done it before. And that was what was the most intriguing. I think it's a little bit weird coming from a craft beer background, jumping into that. But what I'll tell you is I told Ed when we started this project, I want to be able to produce something that I would actually purchase because Jello shots are kind of weird. And just a different market to be into. But the opportunity out there that we saw was massive with it not being done.
Stephen, were you did you perfect your Jello shots? If you wanted the certain quality, were you perfecting these in college? Is that what led you to?
I certainly took my fair amount of Jello shots in college. But it's really interesting. We went back and forth for about a year and a half, really trying to figure out the texture. There was some that are, that were a little bit more liquidy, some that were a little bit more solid. So we really went back and forth, really trying to figure out that mouthfeel on that. I know we talk about viscosity a lot in craft beer. So that was something that was really important. And then looking at the different flavors and then figuring out the alcohol. So we started with a vodka base and we ran with that for about 2 years. And we went back and forth, really trying to figure out the malt base, because doing a beer base in something, you've really got to strip a lot of those flavors out of that.
Yeah.
And so we waited. We didn't introduce our malt product until last year, and that's been hugely successful for us. It's become about 65% of our total business.
Well, that opens up a whole new retail space for you, right? Like you can sell those in like C stores, and they don't have to be specific to like some states like New York. You have to have you have to sell liquor in a liquor store. You can't sell it at a gas station like the Wild West of Arizona. So like, was that part of the driver is finding new retail outlets for that? Was it COVID that made you have to shift? Like what prompted that switch into the malt beverage? Was it, new territory?
When we started, I mean, my background's been in beer. And so I understand, beer, every state's a little bit different, but I understand beer a lot better than I do the spirit side of it. And I've had to learn a lot of the spirit side of it. A lot of it is taxes. Beer is taxed less. And then also to your point, like it's huge. Convenience has become a huge part of our business. It's about a third of our total business, which is absolutely amazing. And then you're right, with all the different state laws and everything with that, there's different places, there's only beer and wine. And so just opened up a ton more opportunities for us to sell.
Yeah, I mean, even in my local gas station where I probably stop there once a day, the girl that I saw you guys on the counter and the woman behind the counter is like, that crushes it. Like they also have the the Fireball version of malt, and she was like, it's not even close. Like she's like, these slurps, she goes, we go through buckets a day, and we're talking like a small little suburban town like gas station. So I can imagine what you're talking about on a larger C-store level. It's got to be opened up an entire new market for you.
Well, I think it's something that's really fun too. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love craft beer. I love all the different things, but this is a totally different beast and a totally different animal. And our whole mantra is celebrate everything. I mean, there's so many things that are going on. You look at COVID, you look at all the other things, and it can be hard, looking at the dynamic of everything. But if it gives people a little brightness in their day, I think that that's something that we really like to contribute to. And I think that, there's so many different things that go on with business, always remembering that these are just something fun that's out there that is going to go along with whatever session that you guys are doing, whether it's meeting your friends for a barbecue or anything else like that, or hey, you get a promotion at work, let's grab a bucket and celebrate with those, because you're going to be going out with your friends and having a couple beers, and this is just something that's a little fun to go along with it.
Yeah, that's actually a great point, Stephen. I think one of the things is, especially like with the rise of craft beer and the rise of beer food pairings and proper glassware and things like that, a lot of things got very, certain consumers might have felt like they couldn't approach those certain categories because of all the different not complications, but the requirements and the parameters and things like that. And I think definitely a product like yourself, where it's something like, we're not going to take anything serious except for the actual business part. When it comes to the marketing and the experience for you, let's have fun. And I think that's something that, not as a whole as an industry, but definitely certain periods, we've kind of gotten very serious about our products. And I think it, especially like you just said, coming out of COVID, I think it's a good break for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the point. I think, we go through our days, we have forecasting meetings, we have planning meetings, we have all these different things, within the industry, but it's also like, hey, at the end of the day, we get together and we have a beer and we talk about things. And I think really getting back into the on-premise, it's been a little bit more of a focus since everybody's starting to open back up. And that opportunity out there, I think is phenomenal. And I think that's what we really enjoy about it, is the camaraderie in the industry, sitting down and talking to bar owners, bar managers, bartenders, and just really understanding what's going on out there and what people are in the bars to do. And it's really just to decompress at the end of the day.
That's actually a good, so when we're talking about, fun and marketing and not to bring up COVID a lot, but a lot of what we're talking about is, some of the companies that have persevered through and who's still here and why they're still here, and the shifts in business and why they had to do it. Did you find that your message, as far as like, fun, celebrate everything, was it something that kind of came out of, the shifting marketplace of COVID, or was this just something that kind of fell in line? Because it's, it does fall nicely into, just celebrate everything, like the time that we have together, not being locked in our houses, that people are healthy, that message that speaks to kind of a lot of what people are going through. Was this something that, just fell perfectly in line with kind of what happened, or was this something that shifted during that time as far as like a marketing strategy?
So celebrate everything's really kind of been our mantra since the beginning, because people go out and they get whatever they want to drink, but also there are those occasions where, even in COVID, you find those little things because it was hard during that time. So to kind of reiterate what you're saying is this has always been part of it, but I think during COVID, I think it kind of stuck out a little bit too. And then really, it was just happenstance. We weren't actually ready to go with the malt. We finally got a version back that we liked, that everybody agreed on, that we were really happy with how it tasted. And it was just timing how everything kind of was able to come together. And I think, people seeing that in the liquor store, because that was one of the few places, you could actually still go. They saw that and they're like, wow, what a different fun thing. And I think that helped propel us a lot. And, I don't know how much people see our branding or not. We don't spend a ton of money on marketing, but the money that we spend on marketing, we try and make it a fun thing. So I think that really helps and goes along with what was going on at the time. And I think now with hopefully people getting back and bars getting back open, it continues to have that same effect.
Who doesn't want a couple of Jello shots when you're locked in your house with your family for a week?
Well, I don't know about you guys. I had never really done any sort of like Zoom happy hour or anything. And I found myself at least once a month doing a Zoom happy hour, either with coworkers or with just my friends that I hadn't really connected in a long time. And it was funny. Everybody kind of went and got their beer and some Jello shots and a couple of other things. So
I think one of my friends' wives had us all download the House Party app or something, and you could like play games, and like there was like 15 of us all on the screen at the same time, and like there was like trivia that you could all do, and we were like it turned into more than just a little happy hour sometimes.
But it was nice because you could actually see everybody's faces,
Yeah, for sure.
So changing gears a little bit, Stephen, one of the things we talk about too, we like to ask everybody is, being somebody that's been in the industry, especially for yourself, being on the wholesale side as well as the manufacturing side and kind of everything in between. What are two-part question? What's a common myth about the alcohol industry? And then second, what's a skill set you definitely need to have to be successful in the alcohol industry?
A common myth about the alcohol industry. I think, from at least from what I've seen, you see so many people, a lot of the alcohol brands that you see coming out now, you see a lot of like celebrity endorsements and those things. And not that can't be great, especially if you have somebody, when you look at Ryan Reynolds with aviation, who's constantly promoting the brand and he's really gotten into it. I think that those can be very successful. But also you see, some brands that are out there that have a big hype when they come out, and they're like, oh, we need a celebrity endorser and we need some of these things to really get going. I think the foundation is really in the quality of the product, of what you're putting out there and getting out to retail. I think that those things are really big. I mean, that's where we found the most success. And I think Tristan would agree with that, is actually going into the accounts, going into stores, talking to people, letting them know about the product. I think that's super impactful, or at least it has been for us, because you see so many new brands getting launched and obviously huge seltzer craze and all these other things where you just assume that distribution is going to be automatic. I'll tell you, everything that we've done, we have fought for, and we've gone in and really, I think the driver behind our success and why we've been so good is we go out and we see the independents. We go out and see all the individual owners. And I think that's been a pretty big point of differentiation. There's a couple of other companies that are out there, and they've had some really great success with a lot of these chains. And I know we were talking about that quite a bit, but the seeing the independent customers, I think, is extremely important. And that's kept us going in times where, we thought we were struggling or anything else. So that's what I'd say on that side. And then remind me of the second part of the question. I apologize. I'll
touch on that once. I actually want to give you a compliment there is your strategy. Actually, when you pull up the Finder app for the product finder, I mean, I'm in a small little city outside of Baltimore, more of a suburb type. I was blown away at how densely distributed you are here in Pennsylvania. And basically, on that type of stuff. And I wasn't blown away in the fact that your product wasn't there. I mean it in the sense that just any brand, you don't really see the density in which how many accounts you literally were in, just in my 20-mile radius of my house. So yeah, to complement that piece, definitely your strategies are definitely seen from the data.
Yeah, I was actually going to touch on that too, Stephen. At least in my area, and I think I know your distributor. The message is very clear. It's on the counter. It's right by the register, and it works, because pretty much everywhere I see you guys physically, it's in the exact same spot. It's always on this, like right there at the register. There's not a ton of signage, but that bucket is like all you need. So when you were talking about like the minimal strategies for marketing and it's concentrated and it's pointed when you do use it, whatever that message is, and maybe you can touch on, this a little bit on, pushing that distributor message. It's clear that whatever message you're giving to the distributor is coming across, because it's uniform. I don't see you guys on shelves on the bottom shelf tucked away. I don't see you behind the counter where somebody has to ask for it. It's almost universally in the exact same spot on the counter where I see it. So, kudos, because that message, I'm assuming that message is coming from you two distributors of where you want it, and they're listening. So maybe you can touch a little bit on how, how you use that message, how you focus it, and get your distributors to follow it?
That's a
The magic question. They give us the secret to the castle.
So to answer that 5-part question, let's see if I can remember all the parts there. Well, I think it's, going back and I guess working from the top down on that is we've created a brand new category. I mean, don't get me wrong, it fits in liquor and it fits in beer, right? Yep. But this is something that's, the really cool thing about it is everybody knows, shouldn't say everybody, 90% of people know what a Jell-O shot is. Yep. And so I think the packaging, I mean, we worked on this for 1.5 years before we put out in the market. We've got the UPCs on the barcodes, on the individual units. We've got them on the jars. And really, we don't have a whole lot of money that we spend on marketing. What we spent money on is POS, finding who we believe are really good people in the organization that have good distributor management skills, and merchandising the accounts. And that goes back to the independents. And I know you guys have probably had the whole marketing thing and had it drilled into you for all your times at distributors and suppliers, but really going back and that key foundation of merchandising. And I know, there's been so many different marketing adages, but the one that we've been driving on is a consumer has to see your product 7 times typically before they buy it. Right. So we look at as many touch points in the store, and being up at that front counter is super key, because people are going in and out, but you're always at that front counter when you're going to pay. And the other thing too is you can buy one of our Jell-O shots for 99 cents for the malt, or 99 cents to $1.50 for the vodka version. And I think that was really the big point of that is trial. We believe that we have a really good product. Obviously, I'm biased, but we figured people will buy that. They get it at the counter for $1. If they really like it, they'll come back and buy that 12-pack jar of malt or that 20-pack jar of vodka. And so we also have some really great things. I don't know if you guys have seen them out in the market. We have these magnetic racks that hold about 6 jars. And what that does is it allows the retailer to utilize space that hasn't, necessarily been utilized. Where all of going down the aisles where all those connector pieces are, those are usually metal. So you can add that on the aisle. And the other thing too, is it really makes the product stick out in the aisle. We always want to get on the warm shelf, the cold shelf, particularly. But that space is at a premium. So we found different ways to make our product stick out, in the market, and being up there, getting that trial run for 99 cents. And then also having different pieces that we can utilize in the market to help make it stick out have been pretty paramount. And I think that answered most of your question. Yeah, and I think that's been fun. And that's why we've come up with a couple of different flavors. We have our original variety pack. We have our mashup pack. We have the cinnamon whiskey now. We got a couple of other cool things that we're planning for some innovation in the next upcoming year.
So Steve, outside, I'm going to be the king of the random questions for you. All right.
Fair enough.
So what would you say in your experience so far would be a skill set that someone has to have to be successful in the alcohol industry?
I think it's really being organized. And I think Churson can probably speak to that too, at least from my experience with Churson, is there's so many different things and so many different directions that you can get pulled, and really trying to dial into the numbers and seeing where you're having successes and figuring out where that's amplified. But that's going back through and looking at all your data, and also really listening to your distributor partners, but then also being able to prioritize, because you are pulled in so many different directions, but also understanding what's truly important about those. And I'd also say the ability to pivot when you see something working, jumping on, the ability to see if it's working and running down the paths that give those opportunities, and also raising your hand and going, well, hey, here's something that we thought was a good idea. Instead of completely trying to push it out, before we really got into this, Church and I were talking about a couple of things that we did at Stone that was like, oh, we're really trying to push this out, versus, hey, what are the consumers, what are our distributors, what are our retailers like, and finding those pieces and listening to them, taking that feedback and putting it out in the market, instead of just trying to do what you think is best, but listening to retailers and consumers, I think is huge, and using that as part of your strategy.
And I think as far as, and I agree for sure, the multitasking and being able to prioritize what's important and what you need to listen to and what you don't, kind of weeding through all that stuff. Was there someone, and your answer for this might be your mom, but was there someone that like you thought, wow, like this person is just someone I look up to. This is a person in the industry that like I learned so much from. Is there like someone you can point to that's like, hey, like this this really changed my career and the way I looked at this business. And I wanted to, mimic, or I really wanted to follow this path and how they did this.
I think that's a fair question. So I think, young enough, and your mom is always an appropriate answer, hilariously enough.
Especially mom.
Yeah, I mean, I think, getting into the industry and understanding that and looking at all those things and being part of Coors and seeing everything that they did at the time is just, that's really awe-inspiring as a kid. I mean, they're a multi-billion-dollar business, and being around that was crazy. So that for sure. But I mean, secondarily, as far as doing, quote unquote, small business, when I worked at Oscar Blues, I was the 43rd employee that was hired there, which is pretty crazy when you think about how big they are now.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough, I got to know Dale's brother, Chris, really well. He's the sales manager, in Denver for Oscar Blues and all that. And I was fortunate to be, exposed to Dale pretty early before the brand was super big. And I remember, when I worked at Coors Distributing, I had the opportunity. I had Chris, and he brought Dale to the box. I had no idea he was going to be there. And it was at the time when I was actually getting my master's degree at Coors. I always knew that I wanted to do, something in the industry. I wasn't totally sure of what that was or what that looked like. And I was really starting to get into craft beer at the time. And I thought Dale's Pale Ale was terrible, but part of the problem was a lot of the, when you start something that's new, craft beer in a can, nobody else is doing it. There was some old product, and I had the only, pale ales or IPAs that I'd ever had typically been skunked. I'm like, who drinks this stuff? This is not good. But being able to talk to Chris and Dale, and actually having something fresh from the tap, it's a totally different experience. But on that business side and having somebody, that I've watched in the industry and grow and do something, when I got to meet Dale at Coors Field in that box, I was just getting my master's degree, and I loved just talking to Dale. And I was reading a couple different books. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Malcolm Gladwell at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I probably read either 2 or 3 of his books at that time. And I was just chatting with Dale and talking about how intriguing I found all of that stuff. And Dale had just read a whole bunch of those books, as well. And we were just chatting about it and talking about all the very interesting things that were happening. And, we'd be sitting so fast forward, I ended up getting hired on by Oscar Blues, and we'd sit in sales meetings and have different conversations. And there were things that Dale would do that I remember reading in a lot of those Gladwell books. And I would just look over at him in the meetings, and I'd be like, "You got that from Gladwell?" And he'd just look at me and smile and laugh at me a little bit. And it's really interesting because you see so many things, that had been mentioned in those books, and watching Dale take it and implement it to craft beer and what he was building was really, really interesting. And every now and then I'll still text or chat with Dale. And, we talked about his new book that just came out, but being able to have Dale as a sounding board and talk about different things to do and just watching how he went to business was really inspiring, especially starting something like this. Because, you never know what's going to happen. And but just trying to take some of those philosophies and those different things and mentality, how you go to it. I was certainly impacted by that for sure.
I think it's interesting, and it actually makes sense, like knowing that you're coming from the Oscar Blues area as well, being that, I remember working at a Wrigley Beverage in Philadelphia when Oscar Blues came out and launched with them. And it was the big, I had a route at the time in downtown Philadelphia, and it was very, hipster area and stuff like that today. But then it was hard, and it wasn't because the product wasn't good. It was like trying to understand the price point, the cans, all the different things, and we had Sly Fox in the area starting to come through with cans and things like that. But it was amazing how many places like struggle with that. And you look now at where we are as an industry, and I look at what you're doing now, and I hate to compare the two, but really that's a great point that, you've been through this. Here's a new type of package, a new vehicle in which to distribute this product. And here's a new concept. And I think that that's very relative to the early 2000s with the, Oscar Blues. And I try to think about, I know, working in Philadelphia, and then with the Old Chub. So one of the things Old Chub was one of my favorite beers still to this day, to be honest with you. And we used to joke around all the time, me and my buddies. It was when you drink Old Chub, if you spilled any on your shirt and you had a white shirt, that shirt was forever stained. And
it's so funny when you think about it, those little nuances that happen and how you take that in, and it becomes ingrained in you. And I think there's so many things, and it's very interesting, having conversations with our management team, and there's so many things that you just know or that you've experienced in the industry that are ingrained in you that you don't even think about. And sometimes it's hard to articulate why you do things, but you're like, well, the experiences that I've had have built to this, and this is what gave success. And so, it's one of those things that I always think about. How do we communicate better? How do we do a better job? And that's something as a small business, that we try to constantly get better on, and we think about all the time. But, what are the little fun things to do? And if I can have nobody else remember anything, going back and bringing it kind of full circle to the question that was asked, when we're doing our ABPs and stuff, I say, if you remember nothing else from this ABP, the only thing that I want you to remember is merchandising is key to this.
Yeah. It's almost like a foreshadowing. You look back, and Nate likes to ask this question. He's asked it in prior podcasts, like, what would your 18-year-old self think of you, and what would you think of, what would you tell your 18-year-old self? But to think back that you had this opportunity to, have a sounding board with someone that was opening up a newer industry that was kind of like a, trailblazer with Dale and Chris at Oscar Blues, and being, this wide open market. And now you're doing that, you know what I mean? So to have this kind of like that opportunity to talk with somebody that pioneered, craft beer and opening up markets and really opening up people to a new idea and a new way of, or a new style of drinking, or, having new products that they might not have necessarily tried in the past. And now it's you can see those same ties as you're doing the same thing. Everybody knows vodka, everybody knows Jello shots, but this brand new space in the market in retail that you have. I mean, what a cool foreshadow. Back then, to think that you might be doing something similar to someone that you respected so much. And also at the same time, what an opportunity. Those two guys just, not only are they, they took chances and risks and they did things the right way. Like that company is just, I have so much respect for them. There was, in a quick side story, I managed Bassini distributing out of Pennsylvania, and they had their sales manager, Tony, and Tony was he was Mr. Craft Beer in Pittsburgh, and for his funeral, Oscar Blues relabeled Old Chub cans for Tony. And so just like, and I think they turned that around in, a couple of days to be able to do something like that. So not only is this company on the forefront of changing the beer industry, but they're also really, they cared about the people in this industry too. So what a cool, is someone that you're going to have a sounding board or, mentorship from, and then also doing something similar to them in a new industry, fast forward 15, 20 years. What a cool opportunity, man.
Yeah, and I think one of the other big things that I really learned that I feel very fortunate about is I was becoming a craft beer geek when I started working at Oscar Blues, which was phenomenal. So I got to hang out with a lot of the brewers, and I'm very interested in processes and in how things work, and like what makes a good craft beer. What are the hops? Like why? Like how do you filter the water? Like why do all of these things matter? Because it's a phenomenal liquid, and so number one, you have that, and that was the most important thing to me when we started Slurp, was making sure that I have something that I would actually want to go out and purchase, because Jello shots, it can be a different thing. It can be polarizing. Some people are like, oh, Jello shots. But the other thing too, that it's also a very universal package. There's some people who really like tequila. There's some people who really like vodka. There's some people who really like, whatever else, whiskey. And what we found is sometimes people don't like, if that's your thing, that's what you drink, and you don't like deviating. I think Jello shots are a little bit more universal. Again, that reason to celebrate, to come around. Most people are usually open to that opportunity. So I wanted to make sure that it was a different experience than a typical Jello shot. And I don't know when the last time was you all had Jello shots at a party, but a traditional Jello shot, you kind of got to chew. Yeah. And it's actually, it's made out of, if you guys are bored, Google how they make Jello or gelatin. And the traditional is it's tendons and bones and all that stuff, and they throw acid on it and demineralize it. Ours are actually made out of a plant base, which makes them temperature stable. So we have a really cool, unique position on that. So we had a really good base for that, and I made sure that it was something that I would actually purchase and consume. And then you look at this in the jar, and that's also something that's kind of like Oscar Blues in a can. It's almost kind of gimmicky. Not that you don't have any particular choice on what a Jello shot's going to go into, but those are in cups, and we put them in a jar. And I think it's it sticks out on the shelf. It's like nothing else that you're seeing on the shelf. So I think that's kind of that secondary piece to it. Number one, have good quality product, but secondarily also have something that's unique out in the marketplace.
I think
the founding of Jello is like 30 minutes from my house in Leroy, New York. We're very familiar with Jello up in here.
I will admit my last Jello shot was Halloween. So
well, that's been the other thing, and that's something that I've talked to a lot of our distributor partners. Like, yeah, we brought home a case of Jello shots, and when we'd hand out candy to the kids, and
that's when it was. It was people handing it out to kids, candy to the kids, and then the adults at the garage is what it was. Yeah.
And
I don't think I won Halloween like you guys then. What was I doing?
The door's always open, man. Come on down.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Stephen, we'll close out with any aside from my personal request, which would be your new vessel to just be that entire bucket, and then just have a few, like maybe like an arsenal of spoons that are attached to it, and then we can start.
Oh, that's funny.
Solids up to next level, and then once you're finished that, you can open up to whatever other innovations you have.
Is it like those wooden spoons you got with the ice cream and elementary school?
Yes.
How big would you go on that sucker?
Based on the past year we've had, let's do 32s, 64s, and a 128. We'll just go with we'll go triple decker on that one.
Just get some of those really thick straws like you drink boba with, right?
Exactly. There you go. The bubble tea straws. Exactly.
No, I think you just got a new product right there, dude.
I'll email you my address, R&D all day long. So
yeah, for sure.
here's your full bucket of Jello.
Exactly. Well, hey, in all seriousness, anything on the horizon, or actually, if not on the horizon, if you want to elaborate on your recent new product innovation with your formula.
Well, it's just I think it's just looking at the different opportunities, right? I mean, obviously we're pretty successful with the vodka shots, and then transitioning into malt, and then now our new cinnamon whiskey that we have out in the market. I think that it gives us a very large breadth of what we can do with any different flavor. I mean, we've tried a pina colada version. And strangely enough, when we did the cinnamon whiskey, Ed had come to me and said, "Oh, we got to do a cinnamon whiskey version." And I was like, "Man, that sounds terrible as a Jello shot. That doesn't sound any good." And then as soon as we had samples made, I tried it and I said, "I stand corrected." So I think that's really fun. And then you guys can think of all the different flavors and alcohol bases and everything to go with that. So there's a very large opportunity that, we're kind of running down the road. The other thing that I'd tell you to do is grab some of those shots, Cheerson, next time you stop at the gas station and throw them in the freezer. They actually work really, really well frozen.
Wow. And when you say frozen, are you dropping them like cubes into like another mixed drink, or are you just like, is it like a hot day popsicle, or
like a hot day popsicle? The thing that's really cool is, I know that there's so many different brands that are out there. Bud's got their kind of like otter pop things. And I know Western Sun has put out their what do we call them? Icicles or whatever they are. And, that's a frozen liquid. And you're very familiar with that, but grab some of the slurps and throw them in the freezer, because that consistency is different and it's a little bit stretchy. So it's a little bit different experience. And I think it's
like a cold taffy.
Yeah, that's exactly. It's a little bit stretchy when you bite it. It kind of stretches a little bit. Yeah. It's a very different mouthfeel. It's pretty good. Not that this is the time of season to be having a whole lot of frozen things, but during the summertime,
if you get a hot chocolate flavor one and put that in and suggest to put it in the freezer, who knows where it could go, man.
We jokingly put out on social media, a couple of years ago, pumpkin spice latte, and our graphic artist guy put like a little whipped cream thing up on the top of it. But I mean, we've explored a whole bunch of different flavors, and we continue to explore those flavors, and obviously the different alcohol bases that you can use. So there's a whole lot of fun things, and we'll have to hop on another one of these, and we can run you down some R&D.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's perfect. Stephen, thanks so much for your time and sharing your story, and what a dynamic journey all the way from Coors to where you are today.
Yeah. It's been a lot of fun, and we got a lot of hardworking people on our team, and we do our best to take care of them. That's always something that I thought is impactful as a company, making sure to give people the time to relax and not work. I don't know about you, Tristan, previous experiences, it was like you need to work 50, 60, 70 hours a week. And not that doesn't happen sometimes, but it's also take the time to recharge because it's this industry is easy to get burnt out in, and that's something that we think about a lot.
Crushes it. Like, hey, here's New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and then also, hey, do you want to also take on Ontario, Canada, or?
Exactly. We've got a lot of our sales managers that have 40 distributors that they're trying to manage, and it's a lot of work. It's really hard to do. So just remembering that at the end of the day and taking time for family and kids and everything else is supremely important. I know I need it. I got three little girls to
Nice.
help raise.
They're beautiful too. I stalk you on Facebook, so I can say you got beautiful girls, man, for sure.
You as well, brother.
Thanks, dude.
Excellent. Hey, thanks again, Stephen. Really appreciate it.
All right. Cheers, y'all.